Now, so often when someone is kind and makes a generous gift to the American Cancer Society, it's not long before it moves right to the hands of one of our volunteer leaders. And that's my opportunity now, Kathleen, is
I'm
to
very
pass that
happy
on.
to accept it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Don. Thank you. Thank you very much for the check. That's a nice, wonderful surprise. Actually, I'm not sure. Where's Tiffany? Thank you, Tiffany. And I know there was going to be a video, and I guess not. So in that case, thank you, Don, for the lovely introduction. I really appreciate it. Both Jim and I are honored, really honored to be here. And this is just an amazing group of people. And I'll tell you, our story goes back a ways. We've had a lot of cancer in our family on both sides. And when my husband was 43 years old, we had a real rough go one summer. We had just lost his 40-year-old sister to cancer. And it was quite sudden and pretty awful. And we spent a lot of time in the hospital then and became quite familiar with the hospital. It was in Akron. And she had left behind a 3-month-old son when she passed away. And Jim and I were very much on the forefront of dealing with that. And I was thinking my husband was looking a little peaked, a little, worn down. And I thought, thank God he's got his annual physical coming up. And as Jim went to his annual physical at the Cleveland Clinic, and the doctor there said, Jim, you're in great shape. There's just one little thing we want to check out. And that was a little extra protein where it shouldn't be. And so the doctor kept pursuing it and checked it out. In the meantime, we had taken our 2 sons off to college. We had a senior and a freshman in college. And this doctor called us up and said, come on in. And we went into his office, and he said the words that I just thought, I never wanted to hear. And that is, you've got cancer, Jim. And it's an incurable cancer. Well, Jim and I just looked at each other and thought, my God, how can this be? And, Jim was one of those people that did everything right, worked out, did everything you're supposed to do. But he was told he had an incurable cancer, and the name of the cancer is multiple myeloma. And we were just absolutely reeling. And I thought back to all the years when I was volunteering for the American Cancer Society. I was going door to door, collecting money every year. And I kind of hoped that would keep the wolf from the door. But sadly, it didn't work out that way. But I can tell you, when we heard those words, it was such a kick in the stomach that neither one of us could quite catch our breath. And I would have given anything to have had that moment back right before I heard those words. Because after hearing those words, our world completely changed. Now, the good news is, when we heard that, it was 16 years ago. And at the time, that was back in 1992. And back then, the prognosis was really 2 to 3 years if everything went well. But Jim's worked full-time, and he's been here through many treasured family moments, and we have been very, very fortunate. And I'll let Jim fill you in.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Don. And I'd just like to open up by saying I am the real James Bond. And this is the beautiful Bond woman of 38 years as my proof.
He says that every time, and it works.
Teamwork, compassion, dedication. We saw it very quickly. I ask a tough question. That's what I do for a living for Ernst & Young. I asked the young oncologist at the Cleveland Clinic, I said, you probably don't want to do this, but I'm going to put you in the spot. How long do you think I will live? And as Kathleen said, he said months. Maybe if you're lucky, things go well, maybe a year or 2, maybe 3 if you're really lucky. And I said, okay, let me ask you another tough question. If you were in my shoes, who would you have treat your cancer? Would it be you or would it be anybody else, whether they're in Cleveland, Ohio, or anywhere else in the nation? Probably not to my surprise now, but then it was. He said, you know, Jim, the oncologist who taught my hematology class at the Case Medical School, he works over at University Hospitals. His name's Bob Kellermeyer. If it were me, that's what I'd do. And that's what we did, and I was blown away by a compassionate, honest, and a person who cared more about his patient than he did about himself. And to this day, I admire that, and it's been a big part of our success. Teamwork. Kathleen shifted into high gear and went into library research back in the days before the internet. She found out everything there was to know about this incurable disease, and we heard the plan of Bob Kellermeyer, and we summarized it into a one-page little fax, sent it around to the leading myeloma experts in the nation. These are a handful of guys. We heard back from all of them, and they, in a short period of time. I was not their patient. They were not getting a fee. They responded and told us how lucky we were that we lived in Cleveland, Ohio. They recognized our doctor as a true professional, and they said the plan that he's got laid out for you is exactly the plan we would recommend, and you're welcome to come to our place, but there's no need. You're in great hands. Well, that teamwork gave us the comfort level we needed. That, okay, well, the path we're going down, while it's risky and unlikely of success, we know it's not. That meant a lot to us, and it meant a lot that we lived here in Ohio.
Absolutely. To know that we could stay at home and get leading-edge treatment was so important to us. And Jim started aggressive chemotherapy, and the first regimen didn't work, and we had to move on to another one, and there was, a lot of panic going on. But Jim was in preparation for getting a stem cell transplant, an autologous stem cell transplant, as you all know, using his own stem cells. And the wonderful thing was the doctor at University Hospitals was the doctor that did the first bone marrow stem cell transplant. It's been 30 years ago, I think, Dr. Hillard Lazarus. But Jim was in preparation for that stem cell transplant, and I remember that it was very careful timing on everything that took place. We were very used to everybody referring to day 1, day 5, day 14, and getting in there and getting that program going was really very gut-wrenching, because there were things that happened along the way, an infection here and all kinds of things that could have been roadblocks. But what really made that go off like clockwork was the staff in the hospital. Jim had to have certain tests at a certain time and certain days to make sure that he was in line to get all these other things done. And if that didn't happen when it was supposed to happen, the whole thing would get thrown off, and we were in a complete panic that the cancer would come roaring back on us because we had now squashed it. Well, I learned a couple of things during that time. I learned that, for one thing, we have 5 time zones in this country. We have the Eastern, we have the Central Time Zone, we've got Mountain, Pacific, and we have hospital time. That was really key to understand hospital time. If we knew that Jim was going to have some appointment down in radiology the next morning, my husband's an accountant. You tell him the next morning, he's thinking, all right, 8 a.m., I'm in there. No, next morning means by lunch. So once we understood that, we were fine. But learning hospital time's key. But we learned our hospital time. And thanks to the heroics of so many people on so many levels, just even the admission process. Jim was in a situation where he needed to get in the hospital really fast for some other test to be done, and they just smoothed the way and got it done.